I'm going to attempt another trauma talk. I've got some Rubicon with me and perhaps look at the camera occasionally. I'm working with a lot of chaotic energy at the moment. My lights are on and I've been to the shop. My home's a bit of a mess. And I like to maintain control. So I'd normally like to have my kitchen light off. One moment. I'd normally like to have my kitchen light off and my lamp on and probably a cup of tea and be settled, and I've had a nice bath, so I'm settling, but I'm working with lots of energy. And when you connect with spirituality, you learn about energy, chakras, kundalini. And my experience is just connecting with the feelings in my body, in my psyche, in my being. Sometimes being broken and beaten, feeling so heavy by the energy of the awakening and the trauma. Sometimes you have more energy and you feel unstoppable, which can have connotations from my past, including the rape or kill bind. My uncle JS told me afterwards that I had to tell people that in a particular voice that I'm unstoppable. And again, it's the satanic hilarity of discombobulation, stuff that doesn't make sense, or sometimes it does, but it's not nice, and you just can't help but laugh because they've broke through, and then you feel bad because you're laughing because it's funny. But if you see the actuality of it, or you heard it spoken about in regular terms, it wouldn't be funny. But that's what they do. I didn't sleep. 46% battery. I didn't sleep last night, and I had an appointment today at Town End Court, and I made my appointment, and I had a bad stomach, and my feet were hurting. I had my flip-flops on. I was walking there. I had to have 2 toilet breaks and just keep myself together, or as some people say in Hull, keep your shit together. Came back and slept. I woke up. I sell clothing on Vinted, which has slowed down since the arrest, and I had £7.50 released from a jumper I sold, a polo jumper, not ripping people off, and so I could buy some food and some toiletries and do some singing and just keep moving. in the chaos. I've been thinking about New York because I went to New York circa 2016 when my dad died, and this was a time when the Satanic Murderous Paedophile network were in the grips of me, and I was working for a local care company which I've previously named in other videos. Adca Independence, where I worked before I worked at Newbridge's inpatient unit. I think I extended the timescales on my CV, but it was approximately 2 years at Adca, or a year and 6 months. Well, approximately 2 years, it could have been more, and approximately 3 years at Newbridge's, so I always had it down as. And sometimes my terminologies may not seem like normal terminologies, but that's the Satanic Paedophile network. They indoctrinate you to sound different, like you don't fit in. They reduced my signature when I was a boy and made sure I changed my beautiful, gifted writing, artistic writing, to block capitals, and my signature just became a squiggle, so you couldn't see my name. I still write in capitals because the steamrollering of what they did to me has stuck with me. Sometimes it's neat, and it's accepting that I come from some evil bastards, and it's not natural for me to write the beautiful joined up writing like I used to as a boy. So it's having the balance. They stole that from me and made me write in block capitals, so now I can have balance and write sort of beautiful small block capitals, and I have my signature back, so I can do some artwork and write my name next to it. Sometimes I'd do a or a rather than. And then my friends who met me before the rape or kill bind, or they were perhaps associates or mates, because I never understood how to give people a choice. I was just like Forky from Toy Story 4, who I watched that movie with my cousin and her children, who were a big part of my life, who I've separated from during my healing journey. And I hope we've been good teachers for each other. But I certainly had an inbuilt program that I was trash. Fortunately, I'll call them friends because we spent a lot of time together, and it seems like they were my friends, even if some of them would refer to me as a mate or not. I don't know. I think I had some friends, but I didn't know how to give people a choice. I didn't know how to connect. So there was always an element of the friendship tainted by my pain. And of course, my special needs or disabilities and everything that came with me. So I was working at Adca Independence. I was making progress. I was supporting a disabled rapper, a young musician who had a severe physical disability and also had other traumas relating to grief, and I think he certainly understood. Well, he understood pain because every day his life was painful because his body was so different and he was in a wheelchair. Um, and it was a good job. I was flourishing in my life, training for a charity boxing match, rehearsing for a amateur dramatics play or theatre show, working for Adka Independence. I had a girlfriend, and I was probably trauma blocking because I was just on the move so fast, and the spiritual awakening processes awakened me to the difference of the truth of my life and everyone and everything in my life, and how it used to be with the people pleasing, unaddressed trauma, still connected to my family who were part of the Satanic Paedophile network, still connecting with my brothers very occasionally, and just always feeling the pain of being the black sheep, the person who was less than. I hope my brothers have also had their own healing experience is as a result of me fighting against the network and going public about trauma and truths. And I appreciate it was all, or certainly mostly, my mum, definitely the network, giving each of us roles. So I never really spoke to my, there was a long time I didn't speak to my youngest brother, Miguel. And in this video I will name some people, and sometimes I'll perhaps use initials or won't use names where I feel appropriate. And I hope if any particular people watch this that it doesn't cause offence. And if it does, then it is what it is, you know. But there was a, I didn't feel able to speak to Miguel for a long period of time, and things changed with Joshua. I had some photos which I'd asked him to save on his PC of, I think, my Dubai memories when I was living with my family or former family in Dubai, which I've mentioned previously, a lot of learning lessons and a lot of trauma, and my healing has had a Oppenheimer-esque impact on everybody else whose trauma was under the carpet. And he said he'd updated his PC and the pictures had been deleted, and I think that was one of the key moments of the trust changing. And I think I was, or we was, because it's easy with siblings to think that you're the only one who feels all of the pain. So I know they always had a lot of pressure, and sometimes I'm thankful for not knowing what they've experienced, because I have intuitive hunches at some of their pain, and I also understand if I was informed directly of some of it, some of the things I don't know, or some of the things I wasn't explicitly aware of, that it would just send me it would send me a little bit crazy to know what they've experienced, what I was unaware of, and I think I'd be able to hold space for it and not make any stupid decisions. But I've also been through so much, and I think there's certain things about my brother's paths and my brother's experience, because we were all sort of very cleverly separated and had our own roles. But yeah, I think if I knew certain things, I'd be really angry. Maybe sometimes that's a saving grace with trauma, that each person's trauma is their own, and people may have the opportunity to reconnect with relatives or friends in the future and not have to share everything that they went through. Just have an understanding that your trauma is your trauma, my trauma is my trauma, and I think that can help. But I know Neil at the carpet shop used to control my brothers through money and I think cars and like driving lessons, and sometimes I worry or ponder that Neil hurt my brothers in other ways, and that was one of his roles that I was never privy to. So my plan was to go to New York, or as my uncle JS, who I signed the community resolution for, the Satanic Murderous Paedophile, whose brother was murdered when he was a boy, along with the same brother as my mother and my uncle Neil and their group of siblings. New York. Oh, you're going to New York. So my plan was to go to New York and to longboard in New York and to make a really cool video and to see the Statue of Liberty. I first saw the Statue of Liberty. I say witch a lot, which I think was indoctrination from the network, and with the satanic abuse, it works well with their witchcraft. And I think now, rather than trying to change everything, like go back to my old writing and to stop saying witch, which could be an issue for us both if this is released, is to just accept that certain traps that I live in from the abuse are part of my life. I think if I have my testicle removed, that could unhook me from a lot of issues psychologically and energetically in my body. But I also understand ayahuasca, the plant medicine, has worked miracles for people, including healing people's stammers or stutter. There's a man called Paul Stamets, who is the mushroom guy, and you can listen to him, watch him on YouTube, the podcast episode with Joe Rogan. It's Stamets, Paul Stamets, and he has a hat which is made of a particular type of mushroom. And I think he was healed at the top of a tree with a lightning strike, and he had some crazy experience with, I think, psychedelics, mushrooms, which healed his stammer. Um, and I think having your testicle removed frees up your energy, and it helps you, especially if, obviously, I was part of the rape or kill bind, so I've been forced to rape in my life, and I've had to reconcile with my sexual energy and my deviancy from the past. So I think having a testicle removed can help people psychologically, it can help people energetically, and it's sort of sometimes like giving something back for what you've taken or the harm you've caused, and it presents you as a fair offering to the world, and like a new start. So I think there has to be some boundaries with this sharing to protect my former service user, who for a long time I saw as a brother dash friend, and on reflection there was a lot of learning experiences about boundaries and how you can create your own monster by not living authentically, and you can sort of be trapped in other people's traumas and unhealthy ways of operating if you're not sovereign, if you're not being honest. So I'll just use my service user's first initial, which is D for Delta, and it was a good experience working with him, with D, and which could be triggering because I also did his personal care. I helped him with showering and brushing teeth and shaving, and I just wanted to give him the most independence I could, and he gave me a sense of purpose because I was helping him. And I think I just gave him good support. I saw him as much as I could see someone who I saw him as much as I was able to see him at the time, because I had my own issues, and on reflection I realised that there were lots that he was trying to show me and teach me that I didn't see. And I think later on I got those lessons. But this was something my uncle, when he returned to my life, I think he softened me up before the hammer, or many hammers, started to fall. And obviously during the rape or kill bind in 2020 there was a hammer which was, if I remember correctly, left in my washing machine. And if you're forced to rape, once you cross over that line of doing it and sharing the aggression with the person you're raping, then I believe you know what to do in all other areas. You just become a sort of possessed, possibly maniac or psycho, but like, you become a possessed person because all this trauma that you've shared has spilled itself out on a person you're connected to romantically or in a relationship with. And then you've sort of lost control in the most major way. In the short term, it's some sort of release and empowerment because Perhaps you hold hostility to the person or to the people who abused you and you just lost. But in the long term, it's realizing, oh my God, I've done something that I can never change, which is going to scar me and the other person for the rest of my life. My situation is different because I was forced to do this by a series of mind control when they got back into my life to rebind me and start to recontrol me, because the freedom I had was a threat to them. And I think they wanted me dead so they could zone in on my brothers, or they certainly wanted me converted. So there was a jerry can with petrol, and I'm going to reel this in a moment, and there was a hammer, and my ex-girlfriend's parents, one of them is no longer with us. They came in the car, the bottom of the flat, and I think I remember her mum saying there won't be a next time, you know. And fortunately for me, they didn't come, and they weren't able to get in the flat. And I knew that, but I think what I said is like, bear in mind, it's easy to hide behind your issues and your special needs, but I'm a vulnerable person who's been tortured and forced into doing this evil thing. So I think what I said on the phone is, I need a hammer. And I don't want to be disrespectful if anyone's listening to this, so I want to tone it down. What's a satanic response? Stating it's in the washing machine. And obviously if the parents are coming and there's already been a lot of energy in your relationship where the parents are being very patient and so you know, whoever you are, I believe you know what you need to do in this situation is you need to threaten the person you've raped with the hammer to stop the parents coming up the stairs and to stop the father absolutely murdering you, kicking the shit out of you. And while this is going on, your uncle who raped you as a boy is on the phone, and then all the network are on the phone. I was on the phone with my mum, and I think my uncle Neil, and I think it was Barry Wildman from the shop, which possibly wasn't even his real name. They said he lived in Swanland, and they said it's good living in Swanland because you can always swan off. And he was like a little man who was quite red sometimes, and he had bad breath. But I always thought he was really nice, and we used to listen to songs together and talk about classic comedies. But then I look back, it's like all part of the mind control and the indoctrination of what they used to do, and some of the things they used to say about children. And for example, when talking about a child in the shop, a repressed memory, Barry said to Neil, "It's just right, Neil." Just is a control word of the network. It's just like it's like a speed bump that you live in, just. And then you ask for things with a just, so it makes you feel less than or appear less than. And they would mind control me to speak like, I just want this, I just want that, I just want, you know, maybe I want a sandwich and a pack of crisps and a drink, but they've controlled me. I just want a sandwich. Oh, you've got your just in, so we can understand that. And right, my right eye's damaged. The driver was always on the right. My uncle took me out for drives, and I would perform sexual acts on him for most of my childhood. And there was other drivers who I went out with as a child who would pay for my services. Right. It's just right. Always on the right. Right. That's what Neil would say. Right. Right. And obviously rape comes with a lot of blood and destruction and shock for, I think, both people. And as you know what to do with a hammer, you also know what to do with the petrol, because you know you need to get rid of all the evidence. And I think a lot of they were just telling me what I needed to do and where I needed to go. And I don't want to talk about one of my brother's work locations, but there is a location, sort of Clough Road really, but Plum Centre. I used to work at Plum Centre on Clough Road, which is close to where one of my brothers worked and possibly still works. So while I've been healing, I've also been carrying so much information with me and just understanding, like, geographically. I've survived a satanic network who I confidently can say, like, they know who they know where you're going in life, like what you're just like shapes in boxes. They know where they're dropping you in life. And I think the spot near the sometimes I'm thick with water, bodies of water, so it's I think it's just a river. Maybe I complicate things and they would mind control me to sound stupid, and they would abuse my disabilities, my issues, and my gifts to make me just trapped. But there's a sort of a stream or a river close to next to the Plum Centre, or what was the Plum Centre. I think it's a Formula One place now. And I think that was where I went after I'd done it to sort of cool off and to get rid of the evidence. And obviously they're psychopathically ecstatic about everything that's going on and how they've destroyed your relationship, including my manhood and her womanhood. And you see, I'm not sure that my manhood had started to arrive, perhaps even her womanhood, but they destroyed us sexually and sort of genitally. So it's like going back to that location, which is a peaceful location, and it's a safe space where you don't really see anyone. And sometimes I've gone there and done some shouting, but it's like I know where I generally I'm I'm in this dance with them. A nurse at Newbridges who was a bit like a mother. She's a really nice lady called Suzanne. she used the word symbiosis when talking about a particular service and treatment, some of which I've had recently, and I think this word means it's like a dance. If you have if you're connecting with a treatment service, and I think the symbiosis is their pressure and the service and their imperfections dancing with you and your illness and your pain and your trauma, and you just working towards a connection. And I suppose with the paedophile, murderous, satanic network, there's always a symbiosis that I'm involved in, which has been a prison, because living, and it's like not a lot of people know what I've been through, or that I'm going back to a scene where I've possibly dumped evidence from the rape. I think that's where it was, and my brother worked and possibly still works close by, and they made me change the route on which I went back, the route on which I would go to work when I was at New Bridges. And I think that was so I would see my brother on the way to work, or so I would understand that Neil is always in charge, or the network is always in charge. And then possibly Neil, like the rest of them, is just a big, angry, satanic baby who was tortured, never had his needs met, and is under the control of this perhaps even more satanic Mr. G, or whoever runs the whole Satanic Murderous Paedophile network. And I think I remember my Uncle Neil at my grandmother's Dodswell Grove address. They lived next door to each other, and Uncle JS lived at the back for a short time. I think I remember a time when he was happy in a relationship, and I think I remember my grandmother saying, I think I said, what happened, because I remember he didn't come one Christmas and I used to like to see him. I think she said he forgot it was man, which intuitively is he forgot his manhood was mine, he forgot it belonged to me. So I'm confident JS and Neil experienced these rape or kill binds, and I think my mum probably experienced similar binds with me as a child, Like you have to abuse one of your children or the other one's getting killed. And they're just lost in the pain and the fear, and they'll do whatever this psychotic woman wants them to do. And then once they become it, it's for everything they've suffered, and their brother being murdered, and this power that it gives them, and just come outside the shop, we're going for a nice slap up meal, which I think intuitively means we're going to torture someone, adult or child, we're going to torture someone, that's where we're going. But I just played along when I worked for them as a child and teenager, and I just tried to survive. But that's a psychological. It's horrible what they've done to me, and it's horrible what they've suffered. It's just a horrible. It's just a horrible. It's a horrible existence a lot of the time, but it's an existence I'm alchemizing and making beautiful in my own way. Because it's just death, and that's what they are. It's It's like a Luciferian cult where I can even think about what they told me about how I had to move my body and where I keep the energy, and it's like I don't mind saying devil in my home now, but it's like you're in love with the devil, you're with us. Just let go and be with us, and this is how it's supposed to be. It's just right. And I've spoken to support services such as the Samaritans and Safeline, and I've mindfully shared how sometimes I've envied the freedom of my abusers, because obviously you lose your humanity when you turn to such an evil, or are forced to turn to such an evil and become it, which they obviously couldn't do to me even after making me rape my first girlfriend. You lose your humanity. You lose your place in the world because it's irredeemable, it's irreparable. Whereas when you work with your trauma, or even when you're possessed by your trauma and still acting out and sometimes causing pain, I think you're still one of many humans who are part of society, and obviously paedophiles are still human beings, but they become like a non-entity, don't they? Or they use the word nonce, and obviously it's healing for me to share words such as nonce or paedophile on my YouTube because of how I've felt about myself and how I've been made to feel about myself for so long. It's I think the three main sins of the world are rape, murder, and pedophilia. But I think rape, sort of as horrendous as it is, it somehow falls into a separate bracket where it, perhaps not always, but it can be redeemed. Whereas I think, I don't know, is murder number two and pedophilia number one? I really don't know. And then with the spiritual healing journey, like, sometimes I've thought about, um, obviously I'll just say to protect myself at the moment, obviously I've had vengeful thoughts which have taken me to a very dark place. Because if you've got trauma and people have tortured you, then of course you're going to think about torturing and killing them to free yourself. It's just I think it's just a human response to think about honouring your pain. And I think that's part of the healing. You go through the dark night of the soul, the awakening, the going through, having your manhood coming through. And you've got all of this rage, especially if you've been abused as a man and raped as a man. And I was forced to do all those awful menstrual things to my mother and fed feces. So I think it's important that we hold space for the edges of the human experience. And I think there are people who have killed who live in society and have not necessarily got away with it, but I think there's a world that exists outside of the game we all play, and I don't want to disrespect the authorities, because obviously the police really help, or they certainly can help, and the healthcare services can help, and the world is a remarkable place with lots of structures and lots of support. But then there's also sort of a world outside of the world where people have their own manhoods, their own family lineage, energy, their principles, like what they stand for, what is unspoken, and sort of what will happen if people cross boundaries, or they disrespect, or they harm people they love. So I always had or created this character that wanted everything to be nice and everyone to be nice and understanding and get along with each other. And then as I've become a man, which is, or as I'm becoming a man, certainly an adult male or a guy, I'm gonna call myself a man, because I think I've done amazing to heal and to fight this evil, and I understand honouring your values, honouring your pain, honouring where you came from and everything that you're connected to. So while I wouldn't condone, and hopefully that's not a psychological cue that I'm telling people to go out and kill people, but yeah, I'm just saying I understand. I understand it. And I think at the stage of healing, some of the stages of healing I've experienced, like I was really pushed to a limit where it's like I'm close to the point of taking somebody out or taking myself out. That's where I'm being pushed by the energy of healing and changing everything, and hopefully unhooking my brothers from these, like, I used to like those teddy pickers. Let's have a game on a teddy picker, it's already quicker, it's getting quicker. And it's like, I've got to be the person who just like leaves people who are mind controlled and trapped in their own version of where we came from. I've got to somehow change things and unhook them and let them wake up and understand who their dad was, or I think this can apply to both brothers, or truths about their parents and truths about me, and then just thinking through my light and through my actions, hopefully it wakes them up and they can see who I am or who I always was, and how different that was to what was told to them, and how they were told to treat me. I've got shorts on, I just wanted to pull them up. My joggers, I cut them into shorts. Which I think was something one of my cousins, who functioned as an arch nemesis for some time, told me that I should do, which I think had an agenda to it, and I've done it, and they're quite nice shorts. So yeah, I think remembering the rape and walking in society, having accepted it, and still having a lot of my triggers, especially around children, and now I have my ear defenders, and I was in the supermarket tonight and there's a woman with a child, and perhaps the woman also had ear defenders. But I'm just so hyper aware of my energy, and it's like operation sort of get away from the child. I'm obviously aware where which aisle the child's probably going to be down, and then walking past them again and feeling my energy, and probably parents always sense energy, and hopefully sometimes they will sense the difference between someone who is satanically dangerous and someone who is severely traumatized and triggered. But it's often difficult, especially in supermarkets. And I think something my first girlfriend, Becky, who I raped, once said to me was that her mum, they agreed that I was like child and woman friendly. And I've always had a softness to my nature aside of the edges and the pain I've experienced and the torture of my childhood and my life. But that's certainly something they took from me. Because to be a woman and child friendly man, even though I was probably only a guy at the time, or maybe becoming a man, I had my own flat, which I think was something Neil got for me, and the bed, so they're in, and then we couldn't have a headboard, and he put his knees on the bed and asked if we'd been shagging, was one of the terms he used. So they were always in and always controlling, but I was just whizzing around trying to navigate the life I lived. And I think when I first met Becky, it was nice to obviously meet her, and I think we connected quite quickly, which sometimes happens. But I think I was always like, I had to relay back to my uncle what was going on in my life and who I was with, and obviously he was always a specialist in every area, especially sex. So telling me what I had to say and what I had to do, and I think he convinced me that her, or that lass, oh, seems like a real nice lass. Oh, you'll have to go around, she'll think you don't care. So I think one of the things he made me do was just to turn up at her house unannounced, which was a bus from Greatfield to the centre of town. And then another bus from the centre of town, which went down Anlaby Road and then continued just as a respectful boundary. So I'm just this lost young guy who's been tortured as a kid, and I found love or affection or attention or lust. And then all of a sudden I'm at my girlfriend's home, and I think just maybe inviting myself in and late at night and taking all of the energy into the house, and this like stray human who's been through so much pain, and the parents are probably thinking, what the hell is going on? And there were some things I had to be accountable for, but my uncle was really good at telling me that I had to have sex, or I had to take people, especially my girlfriend, to certain places, and or rip items of clothing, and it's a sort of challenging of whatever masculinity remains in you after the torture. And obviously you don't really know how to treat anyone, so you're just rushing late at night to a girl who you've connected with's home to disturb her and her parents, to take sex and sexual energy into the home. And we got caught once, which was a big impact on our relationship. And I think if my uncle and my family hadn't have been abusing me, I would have just, I think my initial thing was that I just want to see how it plays out with her, you know. Maybe we'll see each other again, maybe we won't, and that's okay. And then obviously you share that with your satanic uncle. Liam, she'll be going with someone else. No, you can't think like that. You think you're mad. So they change your whole mindset, and you just start behaving bizarrely and rushing and thinking you're going to get abandoned because they know how to trigger you. And I think this was when I was at secondary school at the park on Ings Road. There was a girl at school called Sophie who I had a connection with. I think we sort of fancied each other, and we sort of experimented with each other. And then he would have that like sick pedophilic look in his car, dripping with Satan's sweat, because he knows he owns my energy. They all did. And he took it from me. I had to tell him. And he knew that she'd known, and I had to show her in her eyes that he knew or someone knew. And then I think someone said, oh, she wanted to explore with you more, and you've missed out on. I'm not going to speak like too graphically in this video, but I like missed out on like experimenting more with a person who I connected to during my adolescence. And you're just looking at the girl as a tortured, abused person who she doesn't want to go anywhere near you. And then I think you get dumped. I think I got dumped outside class, and I think she called me a goofy cunt, but then I think she said sorry. But they know how to break everything, and it's just so evil. Oh yeah, what's she called? What they're called? Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what to call him. And you think about coal, you put coal on a fire. You could feed someone coal if you were evil, or you could smear coal on their face and they would be eating black, rocky, fiery, charry coal. Or they would be covered in black, dirty coal. So the English language, this name is relevant because it's the name of an uncle and my dad's brother. No, I'll use the other brother who's passed on because I think that's more respectful. One of my dad's brothers was called Michael, and obviously Michael is generally either Mike or Michael. And if I was to tell someone how to call any random person who was called Michael, I would check with my brain, does he prefer to be called Michael or does he prefer to be called Mike? and let's say he prefers the full name. So I'm talking to my neighbour, for example, and I'm going to tell them to call him Michael. So I'll say, just call him Michael. But the paedophile satanic JS version, and I think a lot of them use the same sort of lingo because it's their freedom in Luciferville. Oh yeah, without maybe even the unnecessary impression, call him Michael. Yeah. So yeah, he's already in. Call him Michael. Yeah, that's what I'd call him. Or call him Michael. Or maybe take it from him because they don't care. Call him Mike. Yeah. Just call him M. Me. My. Oh, no. This is what it would be. I've got it. Call him Mikey. No, it wouldn't. It'd be call him Mickey. Yeah. Got it. Just call him Mickey. Yeah, I know. He's one of them. He's real old fashioned. Call him COAL. You're calling someone. It's an assault. It's a psychological abuse. It changes. Call him Michael to call him. Whether it's Michael, Mickey, Mario. Pardon my examples. And lots of this plays out in the language they use and how they treat people and how they make you treat people. That's what I'd call him. Back to D, his mother would kindly buy me a takeaway when she would buy him a takeaway. And she would cook for me quite a lot. And I think I was quite skinny after coming back from Barcelona circa 2015. So working in the home was sometimes stressful, but it was a good learning experience. It was empowering to give service to a vulnerable adult who needed support. Well, then I would often get fed like quite a lot, these big portions and sometimes takeaways, and it was really nice. But reconnecting with my uncle, who was obviously trying to kill me or convert me or create distance to harm, kill or convert my brothers. Initially, I think he was just asking me a load of questions, and then you're on the settee, and sometimes he'd like, make sure you're watching what he's, make sure your eyes are on what he's watching, or make sure you're drinking your tea. Ian, sup, you know, sup your tea, drink your tea. And sometimes, like I say, some of this is funny. An hour and 3 minutes. I'm going to try and cap this off in the next 10 or 20 minutes, and I need a week. But what's behind it is stealing innocence, torture, murder, psychopathy, violence. So the reality of it is not funny. So for example, when I was making people laugh after the rape by telling everybody I'm unstoppable, because there is some, it's hard to say that's hilarious, but when you let go of trying to be a good human, if you hear some shocking news about someone who was raped and tortured the girlfriend, and then they're behaving bizarrely, they're with the group of friends, but you're still not seeing that menace in their eyes who's a stealer of someone's freedom. They're somehow surviving, and they're talking strange language so people understand. Don't understand. Tell them what we stole from you as a kid. Tell them you like Star Wars. And then put your head down so they can see the yeah. And then they'll look at you and they'll say, do you mean Star Wars? Very difficult person who's bringing all of this energy into our friend group. So to the... what was I saying? I was saying something else. And one of my friends, who I'll use initial A, I enjoyed making him laugh. And I was somehow surviving, which I'd always survived. I'd survived being a child prostitute and being forced to kill and torture, and did all sorts of evil stuff in my childhood, which a lot of it's repressed. And I know how to make him laugh. Hey, I'm unstoppable. And there's just all of this, like, all of these men and women as friends, or guys and girls, or boys and girls, because we were only, like, in our 20s, so young people, different genders, finding their way with their own trauma and own issues, and, like, some of the males and female wanted to kill or batter me or hurt me or take me to the police, and then other ones wanted to save me or try to understand what had gone on, because obviously they could see that there was another element. And then I think I didn't see the photo, and I'm going to use a boundary to protect the graphic elements of the whole saga. But I think what one of my friends did, initial T, who punched me in the head, but then also gave me her room some years later in Barcelona, and we've been in and out of each other's lives at various stages, and hopefully, as she lives her life and I live my life, we'll understand each other, whether we reconnect again or not. But I think what she did was showed him a photo of the aftermath of my girlfriend after the rape. And then I had to say to him, I'm unstoppable. So then he's looking at the reality of a human who's experienced torture by someone who's supposed to love her and keep her safe. And he can compare that to me, who's somehow still alive. I'm unstoppable. So there's a contrast, the brutal torture of someone who just, aside of her imperfections, she just wanted to live a life. Assuming she wanted to live a life with me, as much as I maybe was different at the start of our relationship, or maybe didn't give her so many choices, but I think she knew I was kind. So I think that's how they managed to bring truth into the equation. And obviously, once I'm at that stage, having done all of that horrible stuff, I've given all of them the power, I've given them the bloody towel and the photos of my girlfriend in a horrible mess. That's what they're all about, and they it's an understanding that they're right in a way, right, that nobody can really get in when that pentagram's going off, and they're telling you it's all right, you're with us, nobody can get in, you're intoxicated, and it's an understanding of a spiritual energy that they're actually right. To use the controversial word here, penetrate, it's like nobody can really penetrate what's going on in that flat, and the control outside of the flat, including my brother, who's essentially the hostage in the situation. How much of that was smoke and mirrors in the scenario, because the network are really clever, you know, so I think I remember receiving photos of my brother with bruises on his leg. I know I received photos, and he was calling me, and they were making him call me and ask me if my girlfriend was still there. But then there's also an understanding that sometimes things could be different, like where they could still give me all the energy and the fear and the pressure, but at certain times other people in the equation are not actually under the same amount of pressure or danger, but they're mind controlling me to be responding to the pressure. And to draw this to a close, like, I think there were some boundary issues in the service, in Dee's service, when I supported him on both sides. And on reflection, I think there was a lot that I didn't. There's just a lot that I learned on reflection. But when my uncle was back in my life, he was like warping my mind to introduce energy or aspects of my relationship with the girl I raped and things I used to do with her, or things that were part of our relationship, into the home and into my connection with the service user, and somehow convincing me that he was helping me by, oh, that's what you used to do with Becky. Oh, what happened to her? Oh, yeah, do that. Yeah. And I think because the trust was there, and because I cared about him, and I think gave him really good support and was a good member of staff, then a lot of the grey areas and learning lessons are sort of passable. But they really started to push me over the edge, and I think I was saved by D and his mum and my friends and my managers. And I was in some really compromising positions, which I've discussed a lot of this in therapy, so I'm going to protect myself in this instance. But on paper, and I can blame the network for it, and my uncle, it's horrible what they made me do and how they made me behave and how different that was to who I was. Because without them, I was going to make mistakes, and sometimes there'd be differences of opinion, or there'd be life lessons between me and him and his mum, and me being afraid to sort of stand up for myself, but also passionate in my convictions of wanting to support people and learning to stand up for myself. But then when my uncle got in, and I think in one particular instance, D saved me from myself, and I was possessed. They made me drink at work and take him drinks, and it's all giving me that fear that I'm going to lose my job if I don't start changing. And oh, just take him a few drinks on the night. You can have two each, and watch what films do you like? Oh yeah, watch that one with him. And as my manager at Newbridges said, my former manager at Newbridges, when there was back in my life at Newbridges, he said, "What are you doing, Liam?" He said, "Everything was inside with you, and now everything's outside." And I had a female colleague at Newbridges who we really cared about each other. I think there was another element to our connection, like maybe we flirted or fancied each other. Well, and she's in a different. I thought, well, but I think the main thing was we really cared about each other, and I think that's one of the things my manager said to me. He said it. I don't know if he used the word admired, but from what he said, it was like he respected how I used to protect her, but he just doesn't understand like what's going on with me now because I was changing, and just like saying inappropriate things at work in the patient's garden and to the patients, and like introducing role plays and stupidity and chaos. And my uncle, oh, and I'll use the same nest his name as an example because I'm not sure she would. I don't think she would mind, and many people share the same name. Oh, who's that? Tell me again. Oh, and I'll just use. Oh, Suzanne. That's Suzanne. Let me just have a think. Let me just. And he's like running it through what he'd call his mental process. Oh yeah, I've heard about her. Yeah. Right, what you need to do is you need to do this. And I'd always write really good notes because I'm gifted with English. I think I got an A in English GCSE and a B in English literature, or the other way around, and English was something the abuse and the system and the family could never take from me. It gave me a sense of empowerment. But then they did get in by doing all sorts of evil stuff with my work. I remember one time I was doing a piece of coursework at home on this big PC that we had, which they're like old ugly PCs which look like yellow teeth colour. And I think I went upstairs and it was turned off, and I just looked back. That was probably my mum, just turned all his work off that he's done. And obviously they changed my handwriting, and I think my art folder was precious to me because it was something for me. Like when I saw people at school with a guitar, I was fascinated, like neurodiversity. I was fascinated by that energy they had, that power. I wasn't necessarily interested in the guitar, but I was fascinated by they had something. And one of my friends, he noticed that they had a discipline, they had a focus, they had an empowerment. It was like a shield. And I had a similar connection to my art folder and my artwork. And I think my mum told me with a smile on her face that she'd given my art folder away. There was something with a Bruce Lee or a Jackie Chan DVD when I was becoming a teenager, I think before I was raped. And it was very important because I think I was made to go back to HMV and change my Jackie Chan DVD to a Billy Elliot DVD. And I really enjoyed Billy Elliot, but obviously any expression of boy, they wanted to own it and destroy it because I was a threat. Something my dad said to me regarding the death of Princess Diana, he said, think about it, son, they wouldn't want a brown baby in the royal family. And they didn't want a brown baby in the royal family I was part of, and this was not in the royal sense of my Somali bloodline. It was in the bloody royal white supremacy, paedophilic hatred. So obviously I'm a glitch because it's like this beautiful, gifted brown baby. If he grows up to express himself as a, let's say, heterosexual person, which I know sexuality and identity were being more open now, but I think it's perhaps most common for a male to be heterosexual and to have a relationship with a woman and have children. And it's nice that things are changing now and we're becoming more open and honest and free. But obviously, like my nana, who was part of the murder, or the group of people who murdered Lee Smirk, it's her job to get everybody in the paedophile ring. I'm this gifted, special needs, Somali, beautiful brown boy with all of the energy, or what they would maybe call juice, and the natural gifts and their own empowerment. They just sit there in their own peace and they don't want to be disturbed, and they can maybe look at you and scare you with their eyes because of where they're from and who they are. Like, no way on this earth do they want me to spread my seed as an adult. Maybe not the nicest of terms, but to grow up as an empowered male and have a family of my own. It's a massive threat to Satansville, and obviously the truth about the murder of Lee Smirk. And so obviously they just tortured me and wanted me to dress as a girl and put lipstick on me and all of these horrible things, and convinced me that I was so sad because I wanted to be a girl and I couldn't be one, and I'll be one soon. And so taking my Jackie Chan DVD, Armour of God, back to HMV which I think I did get Snake in the Eagle's Shadow one time, and these are part of the Hong Kong Legends collection. Maybe I'll purchase them in the future. But the memory I've worked with is what, without complicating it, is that I was mind controlled. I didn't connect with that DVD so much, and they were dubbed. So I was a Jackie Chan fan as a kid, but then I was also watching Jackie Chan stuff which was dubbed, and it was different to the UK friendly like Shanghai Noon and Rush Hour where we're speaking English and it's easier to follow. However, it's like you take your martial arts DVD back to HMV and you swap it for a DVD which is a beautiful movie about a boy who becomes a ballerina and he experiences, pardon me, all of this oppression at school and obviously judged, and the sort of gay themes in the film, even though I think Billy Elliot is not gay, I think it's his friend maybe gay, or but that's like on the way to just changing and torturing me. And I think that there was a photo of me in my YSL boxer shorts. I've deleted so many photos because it takes the power away from my past. Perhaps some friends have, I don't know, downloaded or saved some of my old stuff, I don't know. But there's a photo of me in my boxers looking like an empowered young boy, and I think that was, I think what they do, I have so many repressed memories, but they have before and after photos of the victims. So it's like, oh, that's before, that, here's the after. So I think that one of those photos of me as an empowered boy in his white boxer shorts was a before, and then I think the after photo is being tortured, and I'd been raped and dressed as a girl and had everything brutalized. Which is a tangent from the original thing. I'm busting for a wee. I'm going to draw this to a close, but the last thing that I wanted to say in this talk, I was talking about the rape and the mind control and Suzanne and just him. Oh yeah, you just tell me. Yeah, you just tell me and I'll listen. Yeah. So they've always got the energetic control of you waiting for them and them being in charge. And one of the things I remember changing was I used to write really good notes, and people would comment on my giftedness, perhaps ask if I was at university, or say that it's like reading a doctor's note. And then I was made to change my notes to the most general notes for each patient, like, yeah, pleasant and appropriate, for example, pleasant and appropriate, pleasant and appropriate, pleasant and appropriate, pleasant and appropriate. Yeah, just put that one. Oh, they don't want to read all that. Whereas previously I would write about having one-to-ones with a patient, which you use one and then the two dots for the time sign, and then one, and then you're having a generally a private connection with the patient where you're asking them how they're doing, how they're feeling. Often I'd like to talk about the trauma history, and it was a learning experience about boundaries, because I think I was so free flow that sometimes I'd perhaps fall into psychologists' remit or other members of staff's areas, and obviously becoming and self-actualizing has taught me how to be my own cog and work on my own, set up my own lot. So he made me change the notes to the most general stuff, and he made me say some things to suicidal patients, which on reflection is essentially giving very ill people messages to free themselves from life. And their response to it is suicidal. And I'm saying, he laughing, and he's like, oh, it's just the way I do it, Liam. Like, people take things too seriously. Oh, yeah, suicidal. Oh, I'll tell you what you've got to do. Right, yeah, what you got to do. good, no, yeah, and I'm working with all this energy, which probably like subconsciously is trying to keep my balls, or not have my brothers killed, or not be converted, or not kill myself. Um, they're probably under pressure, and I think this stemmed from me with an old friend who became an associate because he was connected to me at the time I raped Becky, and he has been on his own mental health pathway. Initial T, and I was supporting him because I supported as many people as I could, which the network and my uncle made me add more pressure to myself. And there was a point where they was even ordering stuff on my bank cards, and he was ringing me up when I was getting paid and made me buy another longboard, which I couldn't ride because it was crap. And they just took over everything to the point where he'd brought soap into my bathroom, where sometimes the children in my family would bath, and he called it the special soap. And I think I was that reattached to him as a man, where he was on the phone to me, and um, I think he said it's okay for me to like masturbate while he's there on the phone with me, and um, that I can speak to him when I'm in the bath and use the special soap. Oh, I always said to your dad, not your dad, oh your dad's dad. I'll always be here for you, always be here for you. No, don't say his dad, say I found him. Yeah, you found him, didn't you? I found him dead. And then you're at the funeral. Ask him when he's going in the fire. When's he going in the fire? And in hindsight, although I've not had the concrete answers, I think my dad had a lot of karma which affected other family members in a perhaps sinister way, which I wasn't made privy to or I was protected from. So maybe in some bizarre way, even though it was a disturbing funeral in some ways for my father's brother, my uncle S, maybe in some way things sort of worked out, even though a lot of elements of them were very distasteful. But they get such a kick from the death, and I decided to take my girlfriend to New York at the time. That was possibly mind controlled by my uncle. And I'm just putting all this pressure on myself. I'm removing the choice from myself. There's more pressure at work. He convinced me to work nights, and I had a colleague who, initial R, I judged him and I was triggered by him quite a lot, but on reflection, I think he was a good man who gave. He was a good man who protected the service user, and he had his own sort of imperfections and perhaps issues that he brought to the service, or as I saw them. But then in hindsight, he was like a strong man who was present for a man who needed support. And then it was my job to work loads of nights and take his night shift, and I had my manager Wayne at ADCA was, if by some miracle Wayne is watching this, I hope you don't mind me naming you Wayne. Well, I've done it now. There were sort of and that's like with the rape. Oh, you've done it now, Liam. I think they even brought me a mirror afterwards, and Neil said there's some rope outside. There was all sorts of, he didn't need any rope. There was all sorts of evil stuff. So I'm gonna, but I was being given shifts which were supporting a special needs service user in the city centre. I think 2 days a week in the afternoon, and then I would do some evenings at D's, perhaps 2 or 3 evenings, and then maybe some weekend shifts, which were sometimes like long days. But it was manageable because it was in town during the afternoon, and and I've got my Miranda House socks on from when I was on the 136 of the mental health hacks. I'm at my home at the moment, and if this is released, this could perhaps be. See, we need to hold space, because people can be ill or people can be suffering, but they can also be managing the suffering and be okay. And it's when we're taken over by the fear, that's when things change. And like these socks are quite comfy. They help me heal my feet sometimes, and I don't need to fall into shame and think I'm crazy because I'm talking about the experiences of my life. But I had balanced shifts where I was supporting various service users, sometimes in the community. Only like 2 or 3 service users I had. I think it was 3 I had who were my regular service users when I was a strong member of staff. So I went from like having nice afternoon shifts an evening, and then playing pool in the city centre with a service user, and then going to D's on the night where I'd have a meal and do his personal. Sometimes evening was different. You didn't really have to get involved in so much because it was like a 5-hour shift. But obviously, I would help him with the toilets and play computer games, have food, like watch YouTube, maybe make music sometimes. And then on the weekend, maybe sometimes I'd be on shift, sometimes I'd be off shift. And then I'm taking the devil into the home and taking all of R's weekend. Well, he was okay with it because he was his own sort of. He had his own sort of martial artist's energy. He certainly wasn't like a athlete, but he had an energy about him of like he knew how to handle himself. And then they're just putting all this stress on me, and then I'm perhaps working 4 overnight shifts, and then perhaps within that having to get a small number of hours sleep. And then see a service user in the afternoon, which I don't think that happened often. I think they tried to protect me where after I had a night, I had some time to recover. But it's really different going from balanced afternoon shifts and evening shifts, and sometimes weekend daytime shifts and long shifts, to overnight shifts of like 12 hours, where you're not really supposed to sleep on the shifts, but I think within most services, like when I was at Newbridge's, we're human beings, so once the service is running smoothly, human needs are honoured. So, for example, I've worked in teams before where they split the teams and you can go for a long break, where generally you can rest. You can't properly ever sleep at work, I don't think, but once the service is safe in an actual sense, then human needs can be catered for. But obviously it was really important for me, for my uncle, to get me on the night with my vulnerable service user, and to leave something in his wardrobe and start with his tricks and all of this chaos, and he's just trying to get me closer to making an irredeemable mistake, or getting them closer to be able to hurt him. And again, on reflection, like a lot of my friends who have children, and obviously my service users who are protected by the company, it taught me about trust and how it functions, because I brought so much chaos and danger into certain services at times. But the trust and the boundaries and the imperfections of those connections, they sort of saved things. Like my colleague R came to the polar bear to see me and D one night when my uncle had convinced me I needed to take him out for the night and get some photos together and give him some of my aftershave, and it's all like lots of the stuff he did to me as a boy. But I'm just innocently going along with this man who's making me think that I need his specialist expertise in order to keep my job. And then my mum called, "Oh, you're getting the hang of it now, son." Obviously, hang has a lot of connotations and a lot of deviancy, delight to them, the thought of people taking their lives. But it wasn't something I was getting the hang of, it was something I was really good at. I still had a lot to heal and had some inter-colleague difficulties with not being maybe sometimes scared to express myself or stand up to ignorant people, and not realizing about my own ignorance, because obviously I'd not remembered the rape, and I think you realize that a lot of people know when someone's raped. So I was connecting with people for many years. A lot of people probably like knew that I'd raped someone, but I didn't know because I blocked it from my mind. And I think a lot of people also saw that I was a nice, troubled person, and possibly different to a lot of evil perpetrator rapists who target vulnerable women, vulnerable people. And one of the things I said, because my uncle was making me play paper toss on the phone, and council estate terms or regular human spiel for masturbating or masturbating someone else is to toss them off. That's the sort of the queen's out of the room. Yeah, pass me his phone. Paper toss. Give it to D, yeah, give it to him. And he's like, "Oh, I've played it before." And his mum's like, "Oh yeah, he knows that game." And it's just a game, but he's just trying to get me closer, and he's getting me drinking on shifts, and it was a close contact in some respects on the night, the way the service operated, and I think D had enough actual trust with his service users where he was happy for them to be in or on the bed with him, because that gave him some sort of like comfort. And when you're a good support worker, those sort of times, or the shower times or the toilet times, are where you can really connect with someone in a healthy way. Sometimes there's mistakes and stuff you have to work through, but you can bring healing and you can help and you can connect and talk, and they often help you as a staff member. But I think Dan, there's lots of Dans in the world, so sorry, I've gone past the initial, but I think my service user D, I think he saved me from myself, and that was how much pressure they were putting. That's how much pressure and mind control they were putting on me. And I remember him saying to me after a night shift, and I think we'd both been drinking, which I think on paper was not good practice, but then once the service is running smoothly and there's trust and boundaries and you're enhancing someone's life, having a fruit cider or a light beer with or two light beers with a person on a night, or at a pub who you've supported, maybe watching a film, can really add something to your experiences, like working on the night. You're helping them in their life, like support worker aside, it's like a human being who you've had some really good memories with. I watched Chronicle recently, which was a film I brought into the service before, and we had a good time watching that film. I think it was also a boundary cross of my uncle spilling all of my private, like, what you like, you're supposed to protect. So I'm perhaps not sure if I would have just suggested that film because it was one that was like I'd really enjoyed. And I think I used to like to save my own stuff, and I was scared to properly connect. But I was glad I was able to watch that film through to the end recently. I turned it off pretty much once the credits came on. But there's certain films you can't go back to, or songs, because of your own shame or because of the connection that you have with them. And I was glad I was able to watch the film again. And but I think what D, my service user, said to me, and I've spoken about this in therapy, was I would, and possibly he said, you're a great guy, but he said, I don't want you to lose your job. And I think he saved me from myself in that service. And obviously I've got so much trauma from being a child, and incestuous wounds, and sharing a bed with my mother as a boy, and being introduced to her sexually, and mind controlled by the network to rape my girlfriend, and then mind controlled by the network to bring that poison into my service users' lives. So it's horrible. And then sometimes, like, they'll hurt you with what they've done to you, and you'll laugh, oh, you won't be able to talk about that one again, or you won't be able to, or you'll mirror what he said to you, what's disturbing. But rather than be accountable, he'll deny it and make you feel really bad about it. And there was some of this with the children in my family, and there was a family friend who was a nice lady I connected with in my life at various times, and she had a foster child, and my uncle was just telling me all sorts of stuff and asking me so many questions, and of course they're in your mind, so they break into your protection of the vulnerable people and the lives they've lived, and how their rooms and how their homes look and how they look and what their genitals are like, and who they've lost in their life, and how the family dynamics are. And I think they were outside the homes at various points, and there's this like big heat of like my friends saving me and keeping me alive, because ultimately the network know they fucked up, because I survived the rape or kill bind in 2010, and I was waking up, and I think the photo that my friend took, T, was near Queen's Pub. There was a car with a sticker on, if you see the police, Warner Brother, something like that, and it was the Warner Brothers sign. I had my jeans on because I'd forgotten I was forced to rape and had all of that. I didn't know I was a rapist at that time. Blue t-shirt, sunglasses, hair beautiful and long, working in the services, looked so cool, arms folded. And I think that was what changed things for the network. I think my mum called me and said, Neil said, get that off now, we can't have that. And they said the way that I looked in the photo could be concerning to people who had children. And then lots of people like said, why didn't you have that as your profile picture? You look really nice. I was like, proper beautiful Noman. Obviously Liam Noman, which maybe I'm an outlier with the Nomans. I think because of my dad and my granddad and everything, all the trauma I've carried and how I've connected with everyone and been a bit like Harry Potter, the gift and the curse. But I think that was what changed things, because I had all of the stuff what they did to me as a kid, and then they forced me to rape, And now I'm working, I'm connecting with people, training for a charity boxing match. I'm gonna have to cut this one short, but as far as I remember, I couldn't take photos in New York or New York. I had my girlfriend with me, initial J, she was very supportive in a healing capacity, even though I couldn't see it. And I think she helped me with my friends keep me alive. But like again, New York was something I always wanted to go, and it was changed by my finding my dad dead on my 28th birthday after kicking his door down with another family member I've disconnected from. Then I'm taking my girlfriend to New York. Now I can't take photos in that New York. They're already in my service, like making me send photos of service users and compromise their safety and do all of this crazy stuff. I deleted my India vlogs because they made me mention my little brother in one of the first vlogs, I think number 1, and then Neil had to be mentioned in one of the later ones, perhaps 24, or he wouldn't be best pleased, because they need that light, they need that power, they need to know that they still own me. And a wizard who's saved £4,000 and survived them and all of the hell they've given him from all of those years is a massive threat to them. If this is released, I hope it's helped someone in a healing capacity. It was so difficult having my successes at Adca Independence and Newbridge's inpatient units changed into failures which involved compromising the safety of my service users, and I believe resulted in some patient suicides and some chaos and some hell on the units. And it just marked all of the success and the hard work, and they made sure they were in the newsletter which I created. Tried to be on time with it every 2 weeks, Newbridge's news. I think he made me put something about Barcelona in the newsletter and describe it as beautiful, or they'd say beautiful. So when reading it, you've taken someone's autonomy away from them because you're telling them it's beautiful, which isn't always bad. But it was like they knew everybody would notice that word. And then he'd say to me, hey, I've been telling everyone, we're in Newbridge's news. Beautiful. Barcelona. And that's where I went, and I had freedom before they wanted me to make my girlfriend have an accident and take photos on the beach of nuded people and cause loads of chaos. And there's so much. Thank you for listening. Namaste.